You feel that in the air? That's the king returning for his damn crown. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to week 15 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL season. And you might as well start calling me Jon Snow, because ladies and gentlemen, the king in the north is back. 9-3 in week 14 in the CFL picks, right back to where that's the standard that we have set over the last couple of years, and we're right back to it this week. And it includes going 4-0 straight up last week and 4-0 against the spread. God, does it ever feel so good to be back. But now it's not a matter of sitting here and patting myself on the back and resting on my laurels. That has to continue. We got to start building a streak here as we head towards the end of the season and into the postseason. But my God, does 9-3 ever feel incredible. CFL Fantasy had a little bit of a down week last week, only bringing in 71.6 points in week 14. Most of my roster struggled last week. Even guys that you would have expected to be like, you know, money in the bank for at least a certain floor in fantasy, like a guy like James Butler, didn't happen for me last week. I did bring in the 71.6. I was just inside the top 3,000 overall and just inside the top 500 in Derek Taylor's league. That leaves me at 1328.5 on the season, just inside the top 750 overall, and just barely inside the top 125 in Derek Taylor's league. My most outstanding player from last week was Winnipeg wide receiver Kenny Lawler, catching 4 balls for 104 yards and a receiving touchdown, good for 20.4 points. Trey Ford did outscore him points-wise, but that was because he had my captain multiplier on him. So I'm going to go with Kenny Lawler because his base score higher than everybody else. Super intriguing 4-game slate here in the CFL in week 15. We got the Toronto Argos in Montreal taking on the Alouettes. Saskatchewan plays host to the Edmonton Elks. We've got Winnipeg in Hamilton to take on the Ticats, and the Ottawa REDBLACKS, reeling losers of 6 straight games, in BC to take on a Lions team coming off of their bye. Couple of interesting league-wide points I've been looking at. The home sides staying hot last week, 3-1 straight up and 3-1 against the spread. Now 63% in both of those categories over the last 30 days, which is a big deal. And over the last 3 games, what I wanted to do was sit down and take a look at our 9 starting quarterbacks in the CFL, and over their last 3 games cumulatively, what are they looking at, like touchdown, interception, big events, high events? Zach Collaros, our highest event quarterback over the last 3 weeks, 11 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Chad Kelly also has 4 interceptions in that span over the last 3 games. Interesting point. Dustin Crum, the only starting quarterback to not throw a touchdown pass in his last 3 starts. Crum is joined by Cody Fajardo as the only 2 starting quarterbacks where their touchdown to interception ratio is below 50%. So Crum is 0-2, no touchdown passes with 2 picks. Fajardo's got 2 touchdown passes, but he's thrown 3 picks in his last 3 games. So they're the only 2 quarterbacks that are below 50%, below that kind of even money threshold in touchdowns and picks. Jake Dolegala with the best ratio over the last 3 games because he has not thrown an interception. 3 touchdowns, no picks. But he's also joined by Taylor Powell as well as Jake Mayer as the only 3 quarterbacks above 80% in their ratio. Let's take a look. Jake Mayer, 6 touchdowns, only 1 pick, which is a big deal for him given how he was playing earlier in the season. Taylor Powell, just 1 better. 7 touchdown passes, only 1 pick. So with most of our starting quarterbacks across the league playing pretty well lately, let's dig into this slate of games in week 15. That is going to begin with that matchup in Montreal, the Argos and the Alouettes rematching from last week, a game where the Argos punished the Alouettes on the ground, 135 yards on 29 carries as a team, and 4 rushing touchdowns for the Toronto Argos, en route to a 4-possession playoff clinching win. And again, Montreal, they got dominated on the ground, only 24 yards on 11 carries for the Alouettes. Both starting quarterbacks were hyper efficient in that matchup. Kelly and Fajardo combining to go 42 of 52 for 514 yards passing. So both of them definitely put up numbers there, but only one touchdown pass between the two of them. So a lot of yardage, but didn't exactly translate it into a ton of points, at least not directly with their arm. Caleb Evans, of note, did come into that game late in garbage time, unfortunately threw an interception. So we're not exactly talking quarterback controversy in Montreal right now. Last week's game marked the 5th consecutive game for the Toronto Argos offensive line that they did not allow a quarterback sack, which is just absolutely massive. And in those last 5 games, Argos rushers have averaged almost 5.5 yards per carry with 8 rushing touchdowns in 5 games. That offensive line is playing dominant football right now. And it's how you win games. It starts at the line of scrimmage. You win it with your offensive line. You win it with your defensive line. If you can win the line of scrimmage, you're in great shape to win football games. That game was a disaster sandwich for the Montreal Alouettes. The defense doesn't start the game on time. They're down 13 points at the end of the first quarter, and that causes you to abandon your run game. When you're down that much, you have to throw the ball. So they basically abandoned the run game entirely. That's because the defense just didn't show up on time. Austin Mack gets ejected early in that game for an unsportsmanlike or objectionable conduct or whatever it was. He gets ejected. The Alouettes lose 3 fumbles throughout the course of the game, so they got fumbleitis. They take 9 penalties for 101 yards. You're not going to beat the Toronto Argos when you play football like that, just across the board. So it wasn't 1 or 2 things that were going wrong. It all cascaded right from the start of the game, and it was a really poor showing for the Alouettes. Tough sledding to have to turn around and play that exact same team again the next week. So we're definitely going to be on the Toronto Argos here in this matchup, even though the game is in Montreal, and even though the Argos have clinched a playoff spot. Once again, it's too early for them to start looking at let's start resting guys. Just too many weeks left in the season. You will start to see that as the season goes along and heads towards the end, but a little too early yet. So definitely on the Argos to win this game straight up. Now, on the line, the Argos are a favorite by 6.5 points here on the road in Montreal. So if this game was in Toronto, are you talking about like a 9.5, 10-point spread? That seems like an awful lot. And a full touchdown, basically, to cover this number does seem like an awful lot in a direct rematch. Like, they literally just played each other. They're getting their second look in as many weeks. This is supposed to be the battle of the 2 best teams in the East Division. I just don't like that number. I'm going to hedge my bets here, and I'm going to take those 6.5 points with the Montreal Alouettes. Them winning this game outright is not completely off the table. So I think I'll take the 6.5 points and hedge my bets. Total in this game set at 52.5 points. It is by far the largest total of the week, and I think this stays under. I think these 2 defenses, look, this number would have hit under last week, and that was with the Argos getting into, the mid to high 30s. I just feel like this number is going to stay under. I think their point total is going to be right around where it was last week, but obviously a closer football game. Let's go 26-23 in favor of the Toronto Argos. So we're going to have the Argos win, hedge our bets, and take the Alouettes with the points plus 6.5 and stay under the 52.5 point total. Let's go to Saskatchewan now, where the Elks are in town. Edmonton in Saski. And Edmonton erased a 16-point fourth quarter deficit to avenge their own 2-score collapse from the week before against Calgary. Kicker Dean Faithful sends Edmonton to their 3rd win of the season in dramatic fashion. Elks are, playing some pretty darn good football lately. You know what a big part of that is? Kevin Brown continuing to arrive at the CFL level. 143 yards rushing last week on just 15 carries. He had a rush touchdown as well. This is now 5 straight games for Kevin Brown where he's carried the ball at least 10 times, and 9 straight games where he's touched the ball at least 10 times. That's keeping your running back active in your offense no matter what the context of the game. We absolutely love to see that. The Elks with 226 yards rushing as a team in that win last week. Now, look, I said before, they're playing some pretty good football, and I believe that they are. There were elements of that performance last week that aren't going to win a lot of games. Namely, they turned the ball over 4 times. You're usually not going to win when you turn the ball over 4 times, and they only had 3 receivers that had more than 1 catch. So you'd like to see them spreading the offense around a little bit more as well. It just leads to better success on the field. But they made the plays and got the ref calls that they needed to get when it counted, because I think if you talk to anybody in the Calgary fan base, there was a call there that might have been a little, controversial. In Saskatchewan, the Riders get absolutely dominated in Winnipeg in the Banjo Bowl, held to just a pair of field goals on the offensive side, and giving up a 42 spot in the first half in points from the defense. Fait accompli. That was one of the least successful whole team efforts that I've seen in this league in a long time. The defense allowing touchdowns on 6 consecutive Winnipeg Blue Bombers drives to open that game. 6 for 6. Boom, 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 boom. That's 36 points on the board just right away. Only 223 all-purpose yards on offense. They were less than 30% on second down, so Winnipeg played very opportunistic defense in that game. I mean, at least the Riders only took 6 penalties for 54 yards. That's good, right? And again, even though these stats in that game obviously count. There's no blowout filtering when it comes to statistics. They obviously count, but there's almost nothing to glean from them, with the exception, in my opinion, of one thing. This Riders team has now shown that they are capable of flat out not showing up. Like, they just did not show up to that game. And now that we know they're capable of that as a team, you certainly have to take that into account. What I will say is I will put enough faith and respect on the Riders' name with how they've played at home this year that I do think the Riders are going to wind up winning this game. So the Riders, I think, are 4-2 straight up at home this year, done most of their best work at home. I think they're also right around 500 against West Division opponents, and that's the big downside to Edmonton. Yes, they've won 3 games this year. They're 1-7 against the West. And they just have not found success against division opponents. So I'm going to go with the Riders in this one. It's weird. It almost feels like an upset pick. But I'm going to go with the Riders in this one at home. Let's take Saskatchewan to beat Edmonton. Now, against the spread, the Riders are laying -3 as a home favorite. I like them to win. It's a relatively small price to pay. I'm going to go ahead and lay those -3 on Saskatchewan. Total in the game here set at 46 points. I feel pretty confident about this total going over. These are 2 of the lesser scoring defenses in the CFL this year. I think maybe ranked I think they're both inside like the bottom 4 or bottom 5 in the league. So let's take the over on this one. Over 46 points in Edmonton, Saskatchewan. We're going to go Riders 30, Elks 21. So we're going to go Riders win, Riders cover, and give me the over on the points. Halfway home in the Week 15 picks, and we'll take this opportunity, as we always do, to shout out our great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca is where you need to go to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea, estate coffee, and flavored coffee blends. No matter what the taste palette of you or whoever you're buying for, you're going to find something great on nerdtees.ca. And speaking of great, it's watermelon oolong, ladies and gentlemen. It is my single favorite blend across everything that Nerd Tees offers. Nerdtees.ca. You're going to want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That's going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, or you're going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar for my viewers in the US. Nerdtees.ca. Promo code BWFinest. Save your 15%. Get your free shipping. Find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. Let's go to the Hammer now as they welcome the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who have once again turned into the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And speaking of Winnipeg, utter destruction of the Saskatchewan Roughriders at the hands of the Blue Bombers last week in the Banjo Bowl. Basically like playing a game of Madden on rookie. 51-6, the final score there. Oof Maroon. And the numbers are as you would expect them in a game that finished 51-6. Zach Collaros, 5 touchdown passes in that game. And most importantly, I think, his first 0 interception game since the 7th of July. So basically 2 months now since he's had a game where he has not thrown a pick. That is super important for them going down the stretch because you get to the playoffs, turnovers are what really matter. Brady Oliveira touched the ball 22 times, turned it into 211 all-purpose yards, including a receiving touchdown. Dalton Schoen and Kenny Lawler combined to catch 9 balls for 208 yards and 4 of the 5 passing touchdowns from Zach Collaros. The defense collecting 3 sacks and only allowing 223 all-purpose yards. Think about that. Brady Oliveira almost out-yarded the entire Riders team. So we can start having the same conversations with the Bombers that we're starting to have with the Argos. The playoffs are now clinched. They've got 5 games left on the schedule. 3 of those come against teams that are not currently in a playoff spot. Winning at this point for the Bombers means a little bit less than building and maintaining those good habits. And we saw pretty well all of them in that game last week. Discipline, ball security, and winning at the line of scrimmage. Those are the 3 big ones. Those are the kinds of things that you want to see them polish up and be hitting like a fine-tuned machine heading into the playoffs, because those things are so crazy critical come playoff time. On Hamilton's side, the Ticats scoring an ultra-important win last week on very short rest against Ottawa. 3-4 days rest? Like no rest at all. Riding a 4th straight quality start from quarterback Taylor Powell. Completed 66% of his passes, 326 yards passing, 3 TDs, no picks. And hey, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the season, but welcome back, Tim White. We have missed you. 7 catches, 180 yards receiving, and 2 of those 3 passing touchdowns from Taylor Powell. Has gone 29 catches for 448 and 3 touchdowns over his last 4 games. And in that game last week, no other Ticats receiver did better than 4 catches for 53 yards. White is now averaging a career high 15.8 yards per catch in 2023 and is tied for 3rd in the CFL in targets with 88. Although with the CFL and their stats debacle, that might be accurate and it might not be. Shout out to the Ticats defensively as well, pitching a 19.2 defensive efficiency last week, building on a solid string of games, despite the fact that they allowed 460 total yards in that game. They won that turnover battle 4-0, and that turnover battle has been 9-2 in the Ticats' favor over their last 3 games. That's how you win football games down the stretch. Generate turnovers and don't give the ball up yourself. Now, it's a real shame that the Ticats have to face Winnipeg in this matchup. There's a lot of teams in this league that I would be more than comfortable taking the Ticats to win, even if it was in an upset. Basically, there's 2 that I wouldn't look at. The Toronto Argos and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Unfortunately, they're playing one of those 2 teams this week. You got to be on Winnipeg in this. They are on a freight train right now, and it's not just the blowout from last week. It's just how they've been playing basically the last month, especially. Like, that team is just turning around and becoming exactly what we thought that team was going to be right from the jump. You got to be on the Bombers in this matchup, I think. Let's take Winnipeg in Hamilton to get the win over the Ticats. Now, against the spread, the Ticats are taking the same amount of points that the Alouettes were taking, +6.5. And again, I think this game has a shot at getting to like 60 points. And if it does, I just don't see the Ticats scoring enough to keep pace with that. Like, with the Toronto-Montreal game, I think it's going to be a relatively lower scoring game and staying under. So I just don't see the Ticats keeping pace here. I'm going to lay the -6.5 on the Bombers, because even if it was in Winnipeg and you had like a 9.5 or a 10, I'd still feel comfortable laying those points on the Bombers given how they're playing lately. Total in the game, 47.5 points. Like I mentioned, I think this has a chance of getting to 60, so I'm more than comfortable going over on the 47.5 point total. Let's go 34-24 in favor of the Bombers. Bombers win. Bombers cover -6.5, and give me the over on the points. And the last game we're going to look at is the Ottawa REDBLACKS traveling to BC to take on a Lions team, not only getting the late game this week, but coming off their bye. Very well rested. Now, can we look at that Ottawa game last week and say that they deserved better? Probably. We'd probably say they deserved better, but they do ultimately drop their 6th straight game by a field goal against the Hamilton Ticats. Dustin Crum's 5th 0-touchdown game in his last 6. That's not to say that he played poorly. He put up 65% on his completions. That's fine. 265 passing yards. Nothing wrong with that at all. Didn't throw a touchdown for his 5th game in the last 6, and did throw an interception, but he did add 42 yards on 9 carries with a rush touchdown. He didn't play bad. That was part of a 460-yard offensive effort, like we mentioned, for the REDBLACKS. But they can't keep pace because the defense is terrible. Like, their defense has just been bad. Their last 5 games, they've given up 152 points. That's 30 points a game. It's not going to be good enough. And it's not going to beat... I don't know that there's a team in the league right now that I think that defense specifically, if it comes down to the defense, I don't think they win those games. Sometimes teams are just snake bitten. We could say that about Edmonton earlier this season. I think Edmonton should have won both of those games against Saskatchewan. I think they were snake bitten early in the season. They've since, luckily, turned that around. But sometimes teams snake bite themselves. Again, with their season on the brink, Ottawa's got to figure out very quickly a way for that defense to not give up 30 points a game, and a way for them to turn 32 first downs. 32 first downs they had in that game against Hamilton into enough points to win that game. There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way for them to figure that out. Good luck figuring it out this week. The BC Lions exit their bye week, still 4 points clear in 2nd place in the West Division, so they still have a fairly comfortable spot there. But they've lost 2 games recently, a game against Hamilton and a game in Saskatchewan. They probably shouldn't have lost on paper. Let's be perfectly honest. This game, by the way, I would categorize as a game that they should not lose on paper. Back in Week 13, however, they're coming off of a 34-25 win in Montreal against the Alouettes. Vernon Adams, with a bit of a homecoming there into Montreal, goes for 306 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no picks, adds 54 yards on 8 carries, so VA is all the way back. Taquan Mizell, 14 carries for 68 yards and a rush touchdown, his first rushing touchdown of 2013. So we're going to get the clap in there for Mizell. That is awesome to finally find the end zone on the ground. He had a couple of receiving touchdowns, I believe, earlier in the year. And the Lions defense, much maligned lately, 5 quarterback sacks and 2 interceptions off of Cody Fajardo in that game, but they did allow 533 total yards. So they were porous, they bent, they just didn't break. But speaking of the defensive turnaround has to start now. You're playing a quarterback that is struggling to throw passing touchdowns. And they've allowed 25 or more points in 4 of their last 5 games. Again, last week, they were high efficiency. 21.3 was their efficiency mark last week. Despite the fact that they did give up 25 points, they were high efficiency because they gave up so much yardage. But that could indicate that turnaround is coming, because if they're going to play an Ottawa team here that's probably not going to get to that 500-yard plateau, they've got a really good shot here at heavily improving that efficiency very, very quickly. I think that's what we're going to see in this game this week. I'm very heavily on the BC Lions here at home, very well rested. Ottawa had the benefit of playing a team on no rest, basically, last week. Couldn't get the job done. What's it going to look like against a team that's got rest? So let's take the Lions at home to hand the REDBLACKS their 7th consecutive loss. On the line, BC is favored big, -9.5 for the BC Lions here at home. Number is 46.5 on the point total. I think this goes over, and I'm pretty comfortable laying those points right now on the Lions. Again, it feels like the Lions offense is kind of humming along, and if Taquan Mizell is like, ooh, I like scoring rushing touchdowns, we could see him, kind of take off here towards the end of the season. And against Ottawa, again, that defense likes to give up points, likes to give up touchdowns. It may wind up being a bit of a blowout. I'm not going to call it a total blowout. I am going to lay those 9.5 points, though, on the BC Lions. And I am going to go over on the point total. I don't think it flies over. I think this is a fairly good number, but I am going to take the over on this one just because how can you take an under with that Red Blacks defense? So over 46.5 points in BC Ottawa. Let's go Lions 31, Red Blacks 18. So we're going to take the Lions to win, take the Lions to cover the -9.5, and give me the over on the points. There you go, folks. Those are my picks for Week 15 in the CFL. Go over them here with you one more time. I got the Toronto Argos beating the Montreal Alouettes, but a close matchup, 26-23. I'm taking the +6.5 on Montreal in a game that stays under the 52.5 point total. I got the Saskatchewan Roughriders beating the Edmonton Elks in Saskatchewan by a score of 30-21, laying the -3 on the Riders and taking over the 46 point total. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Hamilton beating the Ticats 34-24. I'm laying -6.5 on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in a game that goes over the 47.5 point total. And I got the BC Lions in BC beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS 31-18 in the most lopsided game of the week, laying -9.5 on BC and going over the 46.5 point total. CFL fantasy time, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time for a nice bounce back. My Week 15 CFL fantasy roster is right in front of your eyes right now, and we are stacking ourselves a couple of BC Lions. We're going with Vernon Adams, stacking with Keon Hatcher. Adams at 13,500, Keon Hatcher at 12,000. My running backs, Kevin Brown. Again, what can Brown do for me? I hope he's going to lead me to a heck of a fantasy performance this week. Again, he's been on fire lately. And AJ Ouellette, 12,300 for Ouellette, 11,000 for Kevin Brown. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. AJO scoring his third touchdown in his last 2 games, I believe. Now, with spending this much money, I did need to save some money. I badly wanted to put Tim White in my lineup this week. I just couldn't find a way to do it. I'm going to go with Tyson Philpott. I think the Montreal offense is going to have to throw early and often in this game. I think their run game is going to take a back seat once again. I like Tyson Philpott. He's got 16 targets in his last 3 games, and it's only $4,700 for Tyson Philpott. So he is definitely going to be a high value play there for me in my fantasy lineup, and that gave me, I earned the right to have Kenny Lawler in my lineup because I saved all that money with Tyson Philpott. And we're going to min spend on defense again. I got the Riders winning their game. They're against an offense that's certainly been better lately, but on the season as a whole, one of the lower offenses in the league in Edmonton. So we're going to try to save some money with the Riders defense. Week 15 show is now in the books, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Thank you so much as well if you hopped into my NFL live stream last night for the Week 2 NFL picks. We did well in NFL. We did really well in CFL last week. Let's keep this momentum going into Week 15. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees, and to my friends at Nerd Tees, my throat thanks you because streaming last night and then doing this today, it's a little painful, so this is keeping me going. I appreciate it very much. Enjoy the games in Week 15. We'll see you again for sweet Week 16 in the CFL. Only a few weeks left in this season. We're going to be in the playoffs before you know it. Surprise, surprise, the king is back.